You look around the rest of college football right now and you see some media reports from spring practice. You see some reporters shooting video at times that they are allowed to shoot video at some of these other teams' spring practices. But you don't see it at Oregon because spring practice has been closed to the media. Practices, scrimmages, the whole thing, right? So you've really had to scratch and claw for some tidbits of who's shining in practice, who's really standing out in some of these scrimmages. You really got to know where to look. You really got to know who to be subscribed to. Scoop Duck, Ducks Rising, two great spots for intel in the Oregon community. But whether we've heard it from press conferences or whether I've heard it from some whispers in the wind, I do have some takeaways of what has happened so far within spring practice in Eugene, Oregon. There's one bullet point on offense. There's a lot, I think, to talk about more on the defensive side of the ball because I think offense, we know what we got, right? This has been the number one offense in the country in terms of efficiency the last two seasons, like quarterback battle, right? We know that Dante has some really good arm talent. Everybody, including myself, has said that many times. We know Austin Novosad is a good quarterback. We know there's a battle certainly going on there as well. You've got experienced pieces like Kenyon Sadiq at tight end. Even though it's his first season as tight end one on this team, we know the expectations that he certainly has. An experienced transfer running back in Mekhi Hughes coming in, like Noah Whittington in there over at running back, Evan Stewart at wide receiver. Like, we know a lot of the storylines and a lot of things that you might hear during spring practice on the offensive side of the football are not very surprising, to be brutally honest with you. So there's one that I want to talk about on the offensive side of the football that I've been hearing that we've heard from some of these press conferences as well. First one, DeCorian Moore and his electricity and his explosiveness. And then you go, and we know that's the true freshman that's certainly on a pedestal at the wide receiver position this season. But then you got four-star Cooper Perry and his consistency. Those two guys have really stood out. Here from Dante Moore and Sione Lalea about how these two guys have been impressing so far in spring practice.
Yeah, they dogs for sure. Everybody, sees DeCorian, see what he's done. He's doing what's advertised. He's true to his talent. Real fast. He's really good with feet. Got good hands and that nature. So he's for sure what people are saying is true. He's a for sure, legit Coop. He's a silent assassin. He doesn't say much, but when the ball's in the air, he makes sure he's getting it. He's from AZ. It's a guy that came in quiet or making his plays.
Both those boys are very electric, and I feel like they're near plug-and-play players. Whether they're 17, 18, straight out of high school, I feel like they've stepped up to the plate immediately. With DeCorian, he's electric. You get flashes of Tez in him. He's willing to get in and out of his breaks immediately. And for Cooper, balls in the air, he comes down with it for the most part. And he's willing to compete in everything he does, whether it's special team drills, being here on time. He's here earlier than most. Just in general, I feel like those two guys are ahead of the curve for sure.
So here's the thing first I'll say about DeCorian Moore going forward. I've talked a lot about maybe the storylines and which way things could certainly go with DeCorian, but as I hear some of those sound bites, as I hear some of the whispers in the wind, I am now more convinced than ever that DeCorian Moore is going to be a wide receiver one for the Oregon Ducks. Does that mean he plays more at the X position? Does that mean he plays at the Z? Does that mean he plays in the middle at the slot position? I think he's gonna play a lot of different spots in some of these different formations on the Oregon offense, but I think he's the most talented receiver. Yes, coming out of Duncanville High School, opposite of Evan Stewart, who had a really good year last year. I think DeCorian Moore is the best receiver on this football team. Reporters have asked a lot of questions surrounding DeCorian Moore. Every single person has talked about his work ethic, and they've talked about, everything people are saying, it's true. So Cooper Perry is another interesting one. So when I've talked about wide receiver 3, when a lot of other people talk about the other wide receivers outside of DeCorian Moore and Evan Stewart, they're talking Jeremiah McClellan and Malik Benson and Kyler Casper and some of these other names that are out there as well. But Cooper Perry doesn't come up. But you heard in those sound bites, and I've heard it in other interviews as well, and the whispers in the wind, Cooper Perry is a guy that I think could be a dark horse in this wide receiver room to make an impact. Now, am I saying that he's going to be starting wide receiver 3 for every game this season? No, that's not what I'm trying to say with this. What I'm trying to say is he has a lot more depth into this wide receiver room than maybe was initially present. I think the one thing with this wide receiver group, as compared to previous years, there's going to be a lot more of a rotation. There's going to be a lot more bodies. And I think that's a Ross Douglas thing, maybe compared to a Junior Adams thing. Like, remember what happened last year when Trayshawn Holden went out, when Tez Johnson went out. You went down to Justice Lowe, and not very far after that. Now, was it because of maybe what they were working with in the room? Gary Bryant was injured, and maybe they didn't feel as good about some other pieces beyond that. Kyler Casper was injured as well. Maybe that had something to do with it, or maybe just Junior Adams ran some tight rotations. So I think there's a lot of momentum to say that this wide receiver group is going to be a lot more dynamic. It's going to be a lot more versatile, and you're going to see a lot more bodies, which gives somebody like Cooper Perry a better opportunity to see some of the field right away in 2025. Let's talk about some transfers. Bear Alexander and Dylan Thieneman. Both of these guys, okay, when you listen to some of these press conferences, both of these guys are putting in the work. Both of these guys are expected to be impact transfers. Thieneman at safety, Bear Alexander on the defensive line. Let me first talk about Thieneman right now. Every interview, every press conference that's out there, players and coaches rave about the work ethic of Dylan Thieneman. Okay, Dylan is coming from a very different setting at Purdue than he's going into at Oregon. The scheme is very different, so he's got to work hard now so that when game 1 comes around, even when fall camp comes around before that, that he's got to be ready to go, because he's, I think, got to put in more effort to kind of get a little bit more up to speed and learn this scheme and learn the system, because there's younger defensive backs that I think are leaning on him for leadership, that are going to be asking him questions. And you don't want them coming to Dylan Thieneman and asking him questions and Dylan say, well, I'm kind of still learning that right now as well. So it's great to hear that Dylan is putting in the work. He's putting in the effort, and that is what separates good players from great players. I think Dylan, he's the solidified piece right now into that secondary. The defensive line, Bear Alexander. I want to play a soundbite here from defensive coordinator Tosh Lupoi, and then I'll get into more from Bear.
Bear has been, I'd say, one of the hardest workers in the entire defense from a extra work and mental standpoint.
But he reminds me a lot of how Birch was, how Jamari Caldwell was when they first got here, and slowly they start opening up, once they feel more comfortable with the brotherhood we have here. But he's been great. It's been awesome in the building, coming up, getting extra meetings. He's doing all the right things, so taking in coaching.
Doing all the right things, taking in coaching. The last sound bites there from Tony Tuioti. So when people talked about Bear Alexander transferring into Oregon, it was all about, do you want to say between the ears, right? And motivation. I know these were some things that were questioned, but sometimes each story has two different sides, certainly. But you look back to his 2023 tape. I got to give a shout out to Hifliday, the managing editor over there at Addicted to Quack, who did film reviews of each one of these transfers. And he was talking about this 2023 tape from Bear Alexander, and he was blowing guys off the line of scrimmage. Not at Georgia, at USC a couple of years ago. Not last year, but 2 years ago. If that Bear Alexander shows up, if that's the Bear, and Oregon can maybe even take it to another level, and I have all the confidence that they can do that. They took Bear Alexander for a reason. I think they had trust in, 1, Bear, and 2, the coaching staff, to get everybody on the right track for the highest probability of success. If Bear is steamrolling guys and pushing guys back to the line of scrimmage, Amari Washington and Mateo Uiagalelei, this is a defensive line that is going to eat. Bear is a big part of that. And I think a big takeaway from spring that I've taken is that Bear is doing the work. He's putting in the effort. He's doing everything that he needs to do to maximize on the potential that we all know that he possesses. Speaking of that defensive line, let's talk about the edge room. I think there's tremendous depth, and I think that's been a big takeaway that I've taken from spring practice, from press conferences, and some of the things that I've heard, is that this edge room could be deep, really deep. And one big part of that is the development of one Elijah Rushing.
I remember he came in last year as a freshman, just tall, lanky, 6'7" guy. But I think the thing that stood out the most, he prepared and he worked hard every week. Of course, in the off season, but I'm pretty sure he knew he probably wasn't going to get to play, but he prepared as if it was a national championship and he was going to play every snap. So just putting himself in that position, he's definitely going to have a role this year. I think he's been rushing the passer really well.
You look at the two deep at this edge room right now. If you want to start with Mateo and Tatum Tuioti, and then you go to somebody like Elijah Rushing right now, and you kind of heard it there where once he really got his feet under him a little bit, he really started to show what he could be towards the end of his freshman season. You combine, I think, what we can expect from the depth in the defensive line with the depths in the edge room. I think that front is the group that is really going to take the biggest jump, and that's kind of a takeaway I have with all things in spring practice. If Bear is playing up to that potential and this edge room really shows the depth, oh boy, this could be a scary group up front. Let's head to the secondary. That's been a big talking point throughout all of spring practice. Okay, you got all of these open spots. We feel like Dylan Thieneman is really the only solidified starter within this secondary. Who is going to step up? That's whatever. When you talk about intel and when you talk about the things that people really want to know, I think that's one of the things that is at the top of the list. But a takeaway that I have from what I've heard in press conferences and some of those whispers in the wind is there are two contenders that have really stepped up at certain positions in the secondary throughout spring practice. Dan Lanning has said about Kingston Lopa at safety that he's going to be an unbelievable player for us next season, or this season, I should say. We know what he did last season in the Big Ten championship game where he saw action against Penn State. He stepped up late in the season and he did a good job with his bigger frame defending tight end Tyler Warren in that game, and I thought he did a pretty decent job in that specific football game as well. I feel really good about his, the whole thing about Oregon, specifically in the secondary, is the traits and the length. And standing at 6'5", Kingston Lopa has as much length as anybody right now. I think earlier in the, late winter and then going into early spring, I thought it would be Peyton Woodyard. I thought Peyton Woodyard, he did not redshirt last season. I think that says a lot about what the coaches thought to get him on the field last year. But the more I kind of hear about this specific battle at the other safety opposite of Thieneman, the more I think it's going to be Kingston Lopa going forward. Now, corner spots. Those are tremendously wide open, where you've got a transfer in Theron Johnson, you've got young true freshmen, and you've certainly got some folks in between. But there's one guy that people are talking about as it pertains to length and the freakish athletic ability, and that is one Ife Obadegwu.
One of our corners, I know he was here last year, but he's been a freak, and I've always, liked the way he brings it every single day at practice. And
if he's a really competitive player, man, competitive, tough, loves the game, doesn't say a whole bunch, just kind of laid back demeanor and does his job consistently. And that's the thing that you love about him, man. He's got long arms, tremendous wingspan, get his hands on guys. He's physical. He has the right mentality and mindset too. He's made of the right stuff, and I think he's going to have a really bright future here at Oregon.
When I have some of these conversations with others who maybe are a little bit more in the know about the Ducks right now, almost every time they say, watch out for Ife Obadegwu. So I feel really confident that Ife is going to occupy one of these corner positions right now. So you got Kingston at safety, Ife Obadegwu at one of the corners. Dalen Austin appears to be the leader in the clubhouse for the star position right now. So it's all about that other corner. Theron Johnson transferring in, Jaleel Florence coming off of an injury, are maybe some contenders at that other corner spot right now. I want to finish up my takeaways of spring practice with a general team take, a general team perspective. You know, some of these, Oregon has had 2 scrimmages leading up to the spring game. And I think what we've seen in the scrimmages is what you can probably expect to mostly see in the spring game. And it's balance, competitive balance. I got a soundbite that I want to play here from Dan Lanning after the April 12th scrimmage, and that will lead into my point, and I think the positives that we've heard coming out of these scrimmages, and I think the positives that we're going to have going into and coming out of the spring game on Saturday.
That's what you want to see, you know, in spring ball, is some back and forth, and I thought we had some good back and forth today. You know, went both ways at times. You know, the times, you know, offense had success, third down period, defense had success, so it was just some good competitive periods today.
In some spring games across the country, you hear and see these crazy stat lines put up by the offense, or maybe you see offenses don't do much at all, and one unit is dominating over the other. When I heard that soundbite from Dan Lanning after their first scrimmage, it tells me that there are talented players across the field on both sides of the ball. I think as fans, we might want to hear like, yeah, Dante's lighting it up or Mateo is getting in there a bunch of times, but seeing things go back and forth tell us that this team has a healthy balance of talent on both sides of the football. Look, I know we got to really nitpick and really got to try to dive deep to get some of these takeaways, but I think these are things that we can take away from spring practice, maybe some leaders at some position battles as we go through the summer and into fall camp.